Essentially, you can breed these cell lines uh, infinitely, and they do not degrade or die. Now, what that does is it makes her a ideal candidate, or her cells are an ideal candidate for quantum entanglement.
Go to the third one, man.
All right, now this one is the quantum HeLaSphere. Now, this is again science that has already been proven. I'm just taking it to another level. Excuse the cough. So now, why it's a HeLaSphere? This is Henrietta Lacks, and she was a cancer patient who passed in 1951. And back in 1951, it was standard to collect cells from a cancer patient, and those cells would be studied without necessarily the patient's permission. Now, Henrietta Lacks' cervical cancer came with a I guess a mutation, if you will, in which her telomeres enabled her cancer cells to be effectively immortal. So these cancer cells from Henrietta Lacks are called HeLa cells, and they are still used to this day, and they are probably the most common cell in the world of any type, because they are used in labs everywhere for science and various cancer experiments, as well as vaccine experiments and things of that nature. But essentially, you can breed these cell lines infinitely, and they do not degrade or die. Now, what that does is it makes her a ideal candidate, or her cells are an ideal candidate for quantum entanglement. Now, quantum entanglement is when you take two things that are from a same source that are identical, and you're able to get a sympathetic movement out of one by moving the other. And this has been proven, and this works, and it's been achieved already in mainstream science, and it's been achieved at great distances. There is no limit of light speed to communicate between quantum entanglement. This is instantaneous across time and space, so it wouldn't matter if this cell was a mile away or 100 billion miles away. As one moves, so does the other. Now, what we essentially want to do is, through generations, we will breed this cell to be larger. And as it gets larger, what we're doing is we're providing it more food and more environment to grow in for generations. And that's similar to if you were to put a shark in a fish bowl. The shark isn't going to get very big because it's confined to the amount of food and resource that it has. But if you put it in the ocean, it becomes many meters long. So with the cell, it's basically the same thing. And we would want to grow it through generations to be about the size of a golf ball. And then we would create a grid of mills. The mills, in a military sense, is usually 2,800 mills, which is just from my military background, something I took away. And then every intersection on the grid of those mills, creating 32,000 points of data on these cells. And we would basically be injecting ferrous iron, or Fe2, and because we are injecting iron into it, it's a natural cell, so it is able to accept that, and we now have a readable magnetic grid that circumnavigates this cell. We can then submerge the cell in superfluid helium, which is He2, and superfluid helium is brought down to it's 2.17 degrees Kelvin, so that it will actually flow through the cell as if it were flowing through the air. It's able to transverse what are otherwise solid objects, because that's the superfluidity. Now that will cool the cells down to that 2.17 Kelvin. And at that low temperature, we're able to walk up the frequency of the cell until we have an entanglement. So basically, we would start at a very low frequency and we would continue with on both cells, walking the frequency up until we encounter a perfect entanglement between the two. And now we have basically our apparatus that would be able to read the orientation of that cell. So we would have a north and south pole that are marked, and the orientation of that cell as it rotates on any part of the 32,000 mils is going to be a data point. And that is how we would be able to send great amounts of data across time and space instantaneously based on the rotation of the HeLaSphere. So that quantum entanglement is basically enabling interstellar communication without light speed interference.
Okay. So you heard about Stephen Greer, right?
Yep.
Is that so? As far as remote, as far as what he calls remote viewing, is this related?
No. So remote viewing is using your consciousness and reaching out across time and space to observe other things. This is much more fundamental quantum science than that. It's just quantum entanglement. And we're doing it with an apparatus that is easy to transmit or specifically designed to transmit mass amounts of data.
Do you know if there's a certain distance or like?
There is no known distance limitation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm afraid to ask, but have you tried it?
So I have not tried it with the quantum HeLaSphere, but I have communicated with members of the SSP who were having issues in the past while I was active duty. Communication was all through email, and I helped them solve a problem, and they stopped emailing me, so I assume that it was solved.
So you know it works.
I'm confident that it works.
Wow. Before we go on, a little personal question. Are you in contact with any of your remaining family members? Like, are they proud of you, man? Do you know?
I do have contact with a few of them. My oldest brother is actually on my board for my companies. So he and I talk relatively regularly. And I talk to a couple of my other siblings once in a while. And then, like I said, my mother did reach out on Facebook. So very limited contact, but just a bit.
Are they proud of you, man?
I've never asked, and I don't know that they fully understand or know about the things that I do.
Wow, man. This is incredible. I just want to say before we go on, man, I'm so thankful right now for you, and I'm so thankful that God allowed us to cross paths, man. This is like, one day I'll be screaming out like, man, I talked to that dude, man. I can prove it. I got a video, man. So let's go to number 4.